You ever scroll online and just feel like our public conversations have become one big shouting match? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on what you might call the outrage industry. We'll explore how anger itself became a business model and what that's costing our democracy.
It's a question a lot of us are asking, right? You scroll through any social media feed, turn on any political show, and the air is just thick with anger and division. But is this just how people are now? Or are there powerful systems at work that are actually designed to make us angry? That's what we're here to investigate, the mechanics behind manufactured outrage.
At the heart of all this is a huge gap. On one side, you have the democratic ideal, a public debate built on reason and good faith. And on the other side, well, there's our current reality, a landscape totally dominated by outrage, scandal, and oversimplification. So how on earth did we get here?
To really get a grip on that ideal, let's turn to the philosopher Jürgen Habermas. I want you to imagine a kind of vibrant town square. But instead of buying and selling goods, people are there to debate ideas. That's what he called the public sphere, a space where citizens could come together to reason, to argue, and to shape the rules of their society, totally free from the pressures of government or the market. Now, the core principle here is super important. The currency in this public sphere isn't emotion. It's not your status. It's reason. It's all about the power of a well-thought-out argument, something that any citizen can access if they're willing to think critically and engage. In a truly healthy public debate, the best ideas should win out. Simple as that. Not because they're shouted by the loudest voice or backed by the wealthiest person, but just because they are the most persuasive and well-reasoned. The quality of the argument is the only thing that's supposed to matter. Okay, so if that's the ideal, a quick look around tells us we've strayed pretty far from it. The public sphere today often feels less like a rational debate and more like a battlefield. So what happened to that unforced force of the better argument? You know, Habermas himself actually pointed to the root of the problem. It's when our shared social and cultural space, what he called the life world, gets invaded by the logic of the market. When public conversation stops being a search for truth and starts being a sales pitch for a product, everything changes. And that brings us right to the attention economy. In this system, your attention is the product being sold. Platforms and media outlets are all competing for your clicks, your views, and your shares. And what gets the most engagement? It's not nuanced, reasoned debate. It's outrage, it's conflict, and it's shocking statements. Suddenly, polarization becomes very, very profitable. So how does this market logic actually play out in the real world? Let's look at some specific examples of what's called exclusionary rhetoric. This is language designed not to persuade, but to divide and disqualify people from the conversation. We'll start with this documented quote from Donald Trump's 2015 campaign announcement. Now, this language, as you can imagine, immediately sparked a firestorm. Let's break down the strategy behind these words. The strategy here is pure generalization. It takes millions of unique individuals and boils them down to a single, threatening caricature. By framing an entire nationality as a problem, it dehumanizes them, and that makes extreme political responses seem not just acceptable, but actually necessary. Here's another example, this time directed at 4 American congresswomen of color. This quote taps into a different, but just as powerful, exclusionary tactic. This go-back narrative has a really long, ugly, discriminatory history. Its purpose is to draw a line in the sand between a supposed us and a them. It dismisses political opponents not by actually refuting their arguments, but by questioning their very right to even be in the conversation in the first place. And here's one final example from the campaign trail. This statement proposes a policy based explicitly on a person's religious identity. This is a crystal clear case of group-based exclusion. It flies directly in the face of the fundamental democratic idea that people should be judged as individuals, not by their religious or ethnic identity. The goal here is to mobilize a political base by targeting a specific group, which is pretty much the exact opposite of an inclusive public sphere. Now, this kind of rhetoric doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It thrives in an ecosystem that's practically designed to amplify it. I'm talking about the social media platforms where so much of our public debate now lives. And the people who own these platforms have immense power, not just as participants, but as the actual architects of the whole space. Let's take a look at this statement from Elon Musk about the platform X. Now, on the surface, this might just look like a content moderation decision, but really, it's so much more than that. This shows a really crucial form of power.
When a platform owner can just declare a descriptive academic term to be a slur, they are actively shaping the entire conversation. They're seizing control of language itself, deciding what's acceptable and what isn't, and by doing that, they shift the very boundaries of the debate.
Here, Musk uses a really powerful framing device, the woke mind virus, to describe efforts that are aimed at addressing inequality. Let's analyze what this kind of language actually does to the conversation.
This is a classic culture war strategy. It takes really complex issues like structural inequality and reframes them as a simple us versus them conflict. What this does is it diverts attention from the actual problems, and instead it paints the people who are talking about discrimination as the real source of division.
So with all this in mind, how do we actually tell if our public conversations are healthy? Well, we can go right back to Habermas. His ideals give us a really practical checklist. First, is the debate inclusive? Can all voices participate? Second, is it rational? Are arguments winning or is outrage winning? Third, is it free from coercion and threats? And finally, are people actually backing up their claims with reasons? The examples we just looked at fail on every single one of these counts.
I know this diagnosis can feel a little overwhelming, but it leads us to the most important question of all. What can we actually do about it? How do we push back against a system that profits from outrage and reclaim that space for reasoned argument?
The answer isn't simple, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. We can all get better at demanding evidence and actually checking our sources. We can learn to spot and call out these exclusionary frames when we see them. And, working together, we can push for fair rules of debate and demand real transparency from the platforms that have become our new digital town squares.
Ultimately, this is about the health of democracy itself. A functioning democracy absolutely needs a public square where people aren't just sorted by identity or drowned out by rage. A place where the best argument, not the loudest or wealthiest voice, has a real chance to win. If you're interested in digging deeper into these ideas, we've listed some great resources for you on your screen. Thanks for joining us.